In this week's video, I'm going to cover how you can get the best possible photos from what you would say is a boring blue sky day. So back in Slovenia here, and we have a completely blue sky evening. How do we solve that? Because generally us photographers, we prefer to have clouds and fun stuff in the sky. The main theory is to minimize the amount of blue sky, and you can do that by putting a lot of emphasis on the foreground. So that is what I'm trying to do with this photo right here. So we're photographing this lone church in this beautiful bare landscape. So there's not a whole lot of foreground to actually use, besides there actually is. So even though it's autumn, we have flowers that you can see right here. And trying to bring in those flowers in the shot just makes such a big difference. So it's simply just a question about lining up the camera, finding the composition, and just putting a lot of emphasis on those flowers instead of the bland, boring sky right there. So back and forward and put different kinds of emphasis on the flowers. If you do not have flowers, an alternative can simply be to use the contours of the landscape. The side of this little hill with the out of focus grass also worked really well to create some foreground interest and depth. So right now the sun is setting here behind us, but I've been shooting also with the polarizing filter. And the polarizing filter works really well in this specific composition because we are shooting towards the church, which is more or less 90 degrees to the sun. So that is where the polarizing filter really makes a big difference. So the polarizing filter darkens down the blues in the sky and makes the greens pop even more. And it creates this much more beautiful and somehow dramatic, fresh shot with these last light beams from the sun. And then we have like this road that leads into the church. It looks absolutely gorgeous. So definitely, if you have a blue sky day, whether you're close to sunset or you're in the middle of the day, try and see if your polarizing filter won't make a massive difference to whatever you're photographing. Just be aware that a polarizing filter also cuts out any kind of reflections. So if you're around water, you need to take that into consideration. If you're trying to make a reflection, a polarizing filter is not the way to go. No matter what weather it is super important to nail the composition. And if you struggle with composition in landscape photography, such as making depth, finding leading lines, whether you should go for a central or off-center composition, how to create balance, what way to turn your subjects, from what angle you should photograph your subjects, where you should place them in the frame, and so on, be sure to get my 2 ebooks on exactly that topic, landscape photography composition. With minimal text and tons of photos, they are easy to read, and I make sure to get to the point fast. In the last chapter, I summarize everything in several different examples. There are links to both ebooks down in the description of the video. And a massive thank you to all of you who have already got them. And if you want to go to Slovenia on your own, be sure to get my digital landscape photography map, where I have plotted in all the famous locations. It's super simple to integrate with Google Maps, and in that way you have all the different locations by your hand on your mobile phone. Like with the ebooks, there is a link down in the description of the video to get it. On this trip we got several days with what felt like almost summer weather. This also meant several mornings and evenings with golden hours and almost no clouds. So blue sky days usually also means that you will get a lot of heat during the day. So you will heat up the landscape, and then during night, a lot of that heat will evaporate out and it will become quite a cold night. With no wind and high humidity in the landscape, there's a decent chance that you may actually get a foggy morning despite the clear skies. That was exactly what we got this morning. We had a few clouds rolling in, which actually helped us out this morning, but it's not actually given that you get clouds in the morning, but we did get the fog, the atmosphere that we wanted, and it just turned out to be such a beautiful morning despite all our different forecast apps actually said that there would be no fog. But with our experience, we knew that there was a decent chance that there would be fog this morning. We got some beautiful photos at this classic Slovenian church. So with clear sky days, there is a chance that the morning after may actually contain some atmosphere. So even though this is not a tip for shooting directly during the blue sky day, it is something to be aware of that you can maybe benefit from the day after. Now, the most obvious thing when it comes to blue sky days, as we also have today, is simply just to wait for the golden hour. Wait for sunset, where the light is much, much softer. So we have come to photograph the church here in the background. So we're not only going to photograph this beautiful church here during the golden hour, we are also going to stay here throughout the blue hour, as we know that this church will light up, and hopefully it will also be a beautiful photo. So clear sky days, days without clouds in the skies, golden hour and blue hour works really, really great. So the next thing you can do when you are struggling with a blue sky, as we also have today, is to introduce some reflections. As you can see right here in the background, with a blue sky day, chances are you probably don't have a whole lot of wind, so the reflections on a lake are really beautiful. I have this boat here in the background, beautiful old boat, tourist boat in Lake Bohin, and I'm going to get a shot both where I only have the reflection with the lake, but I'm also going to introduce a little bit of foreground with the boat pier right here. So I use the boat pier to frame the photo. So I frame my scene with the reflection, and then I have the reflection just straight on. Super simple. In this case here, I'm using my wide angle, zooming a little bit in and stopping down to something like f13, so I don't have to focus stack too much with the foreground here. And obviously in the photo where I don't have the foreground, I don't need to focus stack. From the same lake a bit later, we also found some stones breaking the surface of the water and thereby the reflection, which created some foreground interest and depth, and we could benefit from the sunbeams breaking into the valley. Obviously, a photo like this is more fun with some high clouds to capture the golden light, and that's exactly what happened at sunset. However, if those clouds had not been there in the post-sunset photo, I would argue that the photo with the sunbeams would have been the more interesting one. On this trip we also visited the famous Lake Bled on two very different mornings. One morning we got the beautiful golden light from the sunrise streaming into the scene. This year I had the idea to try and create a wide-angle photo combining the reflection of the island and church with a foreground autumn leaf. So in this example I combine emphasis on the foreground, golden hour soft light, a reflection and the complementary colors of the warm orange leaf and golden light with the cold blue sky. I think this turned out really well, and I love the detail with the small sun star in the leaf. Generally, I find the warm autumn colors to work very well with the contrasting blue sky. Furthermore, what you can do on a blue sky day is simply just to completely leave out the sky. On a visit to Lake Jesna in the middle of the day, I captured this collection of backlit autumn trees with the long lens among the mountains. Exactly because we had the blue sky, the light could beam in and backlight the trees and atmosphere in the valley. And then I love the detail with the small paraglider up here in the left corner. Likewise, at this church that we also photographed on a clear blue sky day, the backlighting of the foreground flowers and grass makes it pop, and the light also highlights the atmosphere in the valley, creating separation between the church and mountains. And I knew we would probably experience the same backlighting effect at Polarising waterfall. Once the sun rose high enough and we're free of the background mountains, we got the absolutely gorgeous effect of backlit water. So generally, look for backlighting and benefit from how it lights up the particles in the atmosphere and makes vegetation glow. At Jamnik we also got a clear blue sky morning, but the atmosphere in the valley, in combination with the autumn colors, the blue hour colors and artificial light on the church, was just gorgeous. And later, the backlighting from the sunrise lit the landscape, and it was just to die for. Who needs fog when you get these beautiful conditions? But what if you have no light? Well, back at Lake Bohin we started photographing the reflection of this beautiful old house, because reflections, well, they just work. And then we combined that subject with this gorgeous red autumn tree in the foreground and used the leaves to frame the house. On top of that, the color contrasts between the reds and blues works really well. At one point we even had a couple of fishers rowing into the frame, and we could use them as our subjects. During editing, there are a few things you can do to improve blue sky day photos. I sometimes use the gradient tool to darken the sky and sometimes desaturate it. And remember, if you do have a reflection, make sure to do the same for the reflection. The HSL sliders are also great for targeting individual colors. You can desaturate the blues or even darken them, and likewise you can target the warm colors and make them pop a bit more by adding luminosity and saturation. Turning the entire photo black and white is also an option and makes it all about light and tones. And finally, you can add or emphasize the atmosphere and glow. Something I cover in my huge Photoshop for landscape photographers post-processing course. You can get a $45 discount by using the coupon code in the description of the video. In this course I introduce you to the programs, teach you all my editing techniques and use them in 11 start to finish tutorials. I have also recently made update videos for the course where I cover many of the new masking features available in Camera Raw and Lightroom. Check it all out via the link in the description of the video. If you want to join Sam and myself next year in Slovenia, the workshop and others are now available via my homepage. I hope you now feel more comfortable going out and taking photos on blue sky days. There are of course more things you can do to get beautiful photos on blue sky days, but that'll have to wait for another video. See you next time.